Alright everybody, let's get our minds in gear here and imagine this for just a moment. We're all sitting in a crowd of nearly 20,000 people. You anxiously await for the event you were in attendance for to begin. Before you know it, a whistle sounds, and not 3 seconds after that, a fight breaks out between two men. Who knows where they're sitting? Anybody?
At a hockey game.
That's right, Brendan, you guessed it. You're at a hockey game, and more in particular, an NHL hockey game. When the sticks and gloves fall to the ice, it instantaneously brings the massive crowd to its feet to see the fight from a better perspective. When the fight ends, roars and cheers from the spectators ignite their home team as both players go to the penalty box, unless the home team fighter got annihilated in the scrap. And the whole arena is then buzzing with all sorts of energy. Ever since its conception, fighting has been a part of professional hockey, or as I like to say, engaging in the fisticuffs. Back in the early stages, it was not a big deal to most. However, now with vastly improved strength and conditioning tactics, NHL players and fighters alike now hoist the ability to cause serious harm to their opponent, which as of late has raised a red flag to some spectators and league officials alike. This so-called flag has been flying high now for many years, which these past years have been the time where fights have really become a dangerous thing in the NHL. Many people have been hurt. Although the fighting aspect of the game is quite a vicious and dangerous activity, fan support for it now is at an all-time high, according to Andrew Asselford of ESPN.com via an interview he conducted with David Singer of HockeyFights.com, a website dedicated entirely to hockey fights, much like its URL would indicate. Seeing as how a website has been created to fully support hockey fights, this would reinforce the evidence that fans love hockey fights. The website receives well over 10,000 hits per day. Even though fan appeal has reached a peak in popularity, the thought remains in the back of everyone's mind that a player can be seriously harmed. In a recent regular season game between the Atlanta Thrashers and the Pittsburgh Penguins, a fight broke out between Matt Cook of the Penguins and Evander Kane of the Thrashers, which ended in a very dramatic fashion, which I have a video to show. It's already loaded and ready to get on. So, okay, it's going to be right here at the right screen. As you can see, a right cross just totally did Matt Cook in for good. When the engagement took place, but I don't know how long after the whistle blew, I'd say about 5 seconds, one right cross from Kane sent Matt Cook to the ice, and he's motionless. He's out cold. He's seeing daisies. Matt Cook finally came to his senses minutes later as stretchers and EMTs were standing by to help him off the ice, but luckily for him, he was able to get off the ice under his own power. And here that it is again. And he's done.
Right in the jaw.
One punch was all it took to end this fight at the Phillips Arena in Atlanta. From an excited state, the crowd went to a worried state for Cook's benefit. Incidents such as these are catching the eyes of protesters and skeptics alike. And that is why documents to ban fighting have been submitted to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. Gary Bettman, however, according to Kostia Kennedy, a columnist for Sports Illustrated, lacks the courage to ban fighting in the NHL. Kennedy then goes on to say that fights are becoming glorified, somewhat like boxing and mixed martial arts such as the UFC. And I have an example here of why he thinks that. Let's listen in here.
Average penalty minutes per game. Oh, we got a scrap here. Oh, yeah, boy. It's going to be Evans and Larock. That's 260. And George likes the end of the
okay, before this face-off even started, George Larock, one of my favorite fighters, was wearing a microphone that night, and this is what he had to say before the fight even happened.
He should be good with the microphone. Folks, George Larock has been kind enough to put the microphone on for this game, and let's listen in.
It's oftentimes as simple as this, what players do.
You want to? Okay. Thanks, bro.
Okay, let's go. And often as they are. Those are two of the heavyweights in the NHL at fighting. In Kostia Kennedy's mind, the thought of this is ridiculous. This makes it apparent he is opposed to fighting in the NHL, and hockey alone for that matter, because players such as George Larock and Matthias Ibanez are there strictly to fight. Reverting to the thoughts Gary Bettman has on fighting in the NHL, he gave his opinions in an interview conducted by NBC Sports in Quebec in January of this year. He came right out and initially stated that he wants fighting to remain a part of the sport, as it has been NBC came back with some interesting information of their own regarding players who were seriously injured or ended up deceased following a fight, hoping for Bettman to possibly change his mind. Here is an excerpt from the article that NBC shared with Bettman. Don Sanderson, and I quote, a 21-year-old Whitby Dunlop's defenseman hit his head on the ice after losing his helmet while fighting December 12th in an Ontario Hockey Association game, and then died on January 2nd. It has become somewhat of a code of ethics for players to remove their helmets before punches are thrown to protect fists from striking them. Some guys don't do this, however. They keep their helmet on. Some even wear visors, which really gets on the nerves of the big guns of fighting. This fact is certainly an eyebrow raiser to those who are opposed to fighting in the NHL, and thus they hoped it would be to get Commissioner Bettman. In retrospect to Don Sanderson dying, an AHL player who remained nameless in the report, took multiple seizures following a bout he was involved in earlier this year after hitting his head on the ice. This is yet another factor that many believe should be taken into consideration when debating the banning of fighting in hockey. Much like Kostia Kennedy said, players are now in the NHL for the sole purpose of fighting. Every sport has role players, and the NHL has quite a few: grinders, danglers, snipers, etc. And the role that Kennedy is referring to is known as an enforcer, the bad boys of the league. On hockeyfights.com, they have a forum for their members to discuss who the best fighter in the NHL is. This forum has had over 120,000 views and over 50,000 posts, numbers which are both extremely large. The fans of this forum have been able to compose a list of the top 10 fighters in the league as of this year. And to name a few of those players would include Michael Rupp, Eric Goddard, Donald Brashear, Derek Bugard, George Perez, Colton Orr, and Jody Shelley. The number of enforcers in the NHL, however, is quite an abundant one, with over 55 players receiving votes to be on the top 10 fighter list. Almost every other sport that is played does not have players on teams that are there only to fight. However, the potential harm of being injured in other sports, such as soccer and football, is as great, if not greater, than playing hockey. Limbs are broken on nearly a game-to-game basis in each of these sports, and concussions are at a peak at the NFL and NCAA football levels. Each sport has a great chance involving bodily harm, but that is a risk a player assumes to play the sport that they love. In the World Cup this summer, I would guess that you will see incidents involving probably 5 broken bones in a matter of a month. When it is all said and done, more fans come to professional hockey games to see fights rather than stay away and not watch because of them, despite knowing the fact that players who fight can seriously harm each other. Whether or not fighting should be banned is realistically up to NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. However, fans and skeptics are entitled to their opinions, and despite what either side may say, hockey fights do have factors that make them beneficial and harmful at the same time. From my own personal standpoint when researching this topic, I have come to believe that fighting in the NHL is not going to be